less on the budget process and the 1 or 2%. But I'm curious, with the projection of significantly more money being in reserve at this point, would you foresee that making the next budget any easier to pass? Is that deficit number actually smaller or likely to be smaller?
It is likely to be smaller, and it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation. We explain this every year, and there are a number of council members who are pontificating today that know exactly how we do the budget. We don't just take what they spent last year and add to it. We do what we think is a version of zero-based budgeting. The vast majority of the expenses in the city of Houston are personnel related. We're a service organization. I think 85% of the fire department's budget is personnel, and so you start with a big number, but we have a very conservative budget posture, which is we try to anticipate the maximum amount of expenditures we have and the minimum amount of revenue we might take in and put the two together. And so we start from a gap and then work to close the gap. There are other ways to do budgets. We could ratchet down the expenses and to try and do a most likely on the revenue, but then because a lot of our budget is sales tax can turn on a dime. And then there is no slack and no cushion. I think what you heard today was as much about election year rhetoric as anything else.
Speaking of elections, we've gotten a few emails from observant readers, I guess, questioning what the city can and should do to enforce residency requirements in the city council districts. A cursory review will turn up a few folks with homesteads claimed outside the areas that they're trying to run in and that sort of thing.
This is a matter of election law, not City of Houston policy. When they come in to register as a candidate, they essentially are swearing that they are residents of the City of Houston. They meet all of the requirements. In practical terms, what generally happens if there's a question about residency, an opponent brings it up, it becomes fodder for the campaign. But the way the courts operate, you have to file a court challenge, and the courts generally won't act unless the person who is accused of not being a resident wins, because otherwise there's no harm. I understand the frustration, and certainly I would encourage candidates to look over the records of their opponents and make an issue of it, put it out into the realm of public discussion. I know that in my last mayoral campaign, that was a significant issue.
So from a practical and a legal standpoint?
I raised that issue against my opponent. It was not, it's very clear where I live in the city of Houston.
But so you're saying from a practical and a legal standpoint that there is no more proactive footing the city could take?
We review when the applications come in. We review all the information that's submitted to us. So, I mean, we're relying on Harris County voter records and things like that. So, and again, as the mayor said, somebody's swearing to this and affirming that what they're saying is the truth. But there's some checks and balances when we go through the paperwork.
But you will recall the Dave Wilson HCC challenge. He only claimed one place of voting, and that was his place of business, and there was a long court challenge, and he prevailed. There have been former state senator Mario Gallegos had his voting residence at his mother's house, and he maintained a homestead, or his wife maintained a homestead someplace else. It is a matter for the courts to sort out.
Mayor, I believe Public Works is putting up a flood warning system, the first one at Houston Avenue Memorial in the underpass. Just wanted to see how that process is going, and do you think that's going to stop people from driving in when these underpasses flood quickly?
First, it's not that Houston just started to have flooded underpasses. This is something that we built our city on the coastal prairie, and there's no place for the water to go. So we've always had a challenge with water collecting in underpasses, and there is a reason that there's a flood gauge along the side of the underpasses, but unfortunately, apparently, either drivers aren't paying attention or they don't know what a flood gauge is. Those numbers and lines on the it looks like a giant yardstick on the side of an underpass has to do with how much water might be in that underpass. And so we are trying to find more permanent ways of alerting drivers, and one of those ways is to have a float arm that, you know, water begins to rise, it drops an actual barrier across the roadway. I don't know that that will still stop everybody. This last floods, post-Memorial Day, saw a number of folks who drove right around road police cars. One of the things we do today is that as we see underpasses go under, we'll park police cars in the roadway to keep people from going in. I saw some on camera going right around the police car and right into a flooded underpass. But we will do our best to keep our citizens safe. Anybody else? Okay, go enjoy the farmer's market. Still a little warm, but I think the food will be great. I don't know who that was.
It's probably mine.
Someone's calling. That's why I moved it.
Thanks, Mayor.
What are you looking for?
Oh,
No, it must be in the back.
My goal is to be out here at noon.
their goal is to be under here.
Never works in This way I can go sit in my car and eat, and then call them at 12:30 and say, I'm done. So is that why the parking's on reserve, is because farmers market?
Yeah, no. They always take our parking spot. Would you park here anyway?
No. I like to